On this edition of Conspiracy Theory, I want to talk about higher timelines with the trend lines that I use. I'm on a 2-day, 1-minute chart, so this is the smallest grain that you've got, and you can see this is what it's a lot to take in, and I normally don't have this much crap on my chart because it's really confusing, but I just kind of wanted to show what higher time frames do in addition to the lower time frame. So here's all my lower time frame. You can see that this is the peak. This was the old peak, and it got respected here, and it sort of gets respect here, but because it got superseded by this one, I deleted all of the other ones involved with it because they just don't get as much respect anymore when they're not actually in the right range. So that's why I like to delete those, because once they've been broken, they're not useful for trend anymore, because what we're looking for is the trend, and this is the trend origination point. So you start here, and you can see all of the 1-minute lines that I've drawn that are getting respect, and further up too. And I'm using this as a gauge for where price action is working. So we've been through all of that. But the really interesting stuff are these lines. So if we jump out a bit to, like, say, a 10-minute chart, you can see the origin of all of these lines here are this is the last peak. This is right before we had a huge knife and everything fell through. So these are the next highest up. So I've made them long dashes because they've all broken. But before they broke, so this would have been the last one here. I think this is, you can always look at the activate drawing to see where the point is. So the point is right here before it dropped. And that was the last one before it really fell apart. It came back up a little bit, and I think that's where this one came from. Oh no, actually it was down a little bit further. But each one of these lines gets drawn in. I think I drew this one in here because I needed one in the middle. And again, like, this is less that you have to draw it from the peak to the trough, but it's more so that you can see the direction of the trend, so you know whether your current price action is obeying that trend or not. So I drew this one off of like a middle piece that you normally wouldn't have because it doesn't really line up. But I did it because I was looking way down here. I was looking at the price action as it was as it was coming down here. And I wanted to see whether it was respecting it or not, because I think I was in the trade somewhere around like 65. So I was in it. It went against me and then came back up, and I wanted to see how far it was going to go. And so it breaks through this line, doesn't really respect it, breaks through it, but doesn't really get very far either, because we kind of double bottomed here off of these, and I'll get to these in a minute. And then started going back up. So as it started breaking through, so it starts breaking through these ones. This is what gave me a little more confidence when it broke through that one and hit this one, and then broke through that one. So these are the bigger 10-minute lines. So if we take a step back a little even further, you can see all of these lines are from an even bigger time period. So let's go out to like a 30-day, 30-minute and see if we can even see those on it. So even that's not far enough. Let's go, I think this might be 180 days. So let's go 180 days, 4 hours. And this is the origin of that one. So you can see in this that I drew a much bigger line here just so I could gauge it against these other ones here. But as you're looking up, you can see that price action on this day dipped down below it and rallied. So this is the last one here, breaks through, so I created a new one here. But this is still going to be useful later. Price action comes back down and plays with it later. So all of these lines are touches from either here, or then I started drawing them in down here, because this is the trend. And it's functionally flat when you get down here. It starts looking flat. So I drew these in at the finest grain that you can get here, just to see, because this looked like it was respecting but then fell through. Then it actually broke back up again, then fell through. So these are starting to act more like horizontal price lines at this scale. But then I wanted to take an even bigger view of the market. So to take a step back, I went out to I think I went to 3 years 1 day, but let's just look at the max week for a second just to get a really big picture. I don't know if we need the whole week or the whole max. So I drew this line from, way back in 2021, I think. Yeah, so like early 2021, drew this line on the 1 day 3 year, and it connected to this right here on June 9th. And so, or April, June, May. Anyway, so and I think this one connects. Yeah, so on the daily or 4 hour, I think it actually connects up on this one. But I wanted to see where price was going in here. So this is this bright yellow line here. So when we go back into our 10-day, 10-minute chart, you can definitely see price interacting here, where price came back up to try and meet this and failed. It came back up, managed to toy with it a little bit, and in this instance, I was actually pretty impressed with how well it matched. And I'm just going to turn on my eye cancer studies for a second. I thought that this was interacting with just the 50 SMA. This is a daily 50 SMA, which it is. But I can see now, like after I drew that line in, part of the reason there's this congestion here is that there's this really old daily trend line that's almost flat, but you can see it getting tons of support here. Which is pretty cool to see. So what I wanted to do is run this forward and see where that line connects, and sure enough, it gets respect here. And so like later on in this trade, when this starts coming back up again, what I'm looking for is for this to eventually hit that point, and when this trade gets up here, this is going to end up being resistance again. And you can see that all of these end up being resistance. So this is the next line that I'm looking at. This is a fairly strong one, and it's been interacted with a lot before. Price never quite broke through, but then when it finally interacted with it, it bounced off of it and then retested it, like broke through, retested, and then broke. So this is the one I'm looking at for the turn here. So again, this is from like I think 6 months ago. This is on the 180-day chart. But you can see how all of these different time zones sort of overlap each other and provide you some finer detail on the internal structure of how these trades are moving. I mean, like each one of these lines here does still get respect because it's still part of the trend. So I drew it to here, and then when it broke through here but didn't quite make it back up again, this gave me confidence to get in down here at the bottom. And after looking at this chart, I became more and more convinced that this was the bottom of this move and held it through this whole rally. And I'm still in it currently because it broke through all of these major trend line areas and has been challenging these much longer, much more stable lines. I mean, once it broke through this one right here, that gave me a lot of confidence to stay in for the next break and the next break. And this is the one that I think I'm looking at. And once price gets up around here, then I'll start making decisions about whether I really want to stay in the trade or not, because if it bounces off, retests, and bounces off again, then you know that this is going to be it's going to need to rest for a while longer before it can go up any further. And there can definitely be knives still. I mean, you can still have huge price drops overnight based on news, but that's just the reason for the fall, and how far it goes and which of these lines it interacts with are going to be determined by by this long-term price trend. So try it out on various time frames, different equities or indexes. It should work on any time frame, and the higher time frames are going to get more respect than the lower time frames. I mean, so when stuff starts breaking through on higher time frames, pay more attention to it.